Hi there, welcome back to this, whatever we're calling it this month. I can never remember. I do try for consistency, but it's not working out too well because we're taking these long breaks. I'm doing this once a month. I can't remember how I start these. So, hi, hello, welcome back. In case this is your first time here, my name is Summer Cannon. I am a horror writer, but I am also a horror fan. And as such, I like to share things that I read or watch that are part of the horror genre, and otherwise sometimes, with you. Recommendations. Let's talk about stuff. I work primarily in the indie horror scene, so a lot of the books that I'm going to talk about are not put out by the big publishers. Some of them may be, but others not. And again, it's not all going to be horror. I have something non-horror to talk about today, and I'm looking at my TBR pile right now, and one of the books in my TBR pile is a biography on Geoffrey Chaucer. Also not horror. So I will talk about other things horror, but we are mainly horror here. Now, again, in case this is your first time here, I do try to keep it positive here. I'm never going to be someone who clickbaits you saying this is the biggest piece of shit I've ever read. I only want to talk about the things that I like. Luckily, I'm easy to please. So I'm only, going to be talking about the things that I like, but I like a lot. So take that with a grain of salt when I recommend something. It's okay if you don't agree with me. Okay? So, also, it's April 1st. Don't worry, we're not going to do any pranks. So I'm just proud of myself because I'm actually recording and posting the video for what I read and watched in March early. Yay me! I told you, I hate the month of February. March went much smoother for me. So I read 3 books in March. The first, we were continuing on the trend of anthologies and short story collections. This one is called The Map of Lost Places, and it's edited by Sheree, Renee Thomas, and Lesley Connor. It's an Apex book. If you're not familiar with Apex, they have a magazine, which is fabulous. If you can get a subscription to their magazine, they have the most amazing cover artwork in that magazine, and the writing inside. You get short stories, you get articles. I have contributed in the past 1 article, but that was a big deal for me. And their books, they're a diverse publishing house without kind of advertising that. It's always been kind of like a quiet, low-key thing with them, but I've discovered new voices with them, people I've only seen through Apex, creators who are fantastically talented, who have fantastic voices through Apex. So I got this book, The Map of Lost Places. I backed the Kickstarter on this anthology because I thought the premise sounded so cool. It's, not necessarily all horror. There are definitely horror stories in this book, but it's more weird. Think things that are out of place, out of time. Think places that are weird, that maybe wouldn't appear on a map. There's a lot to work with the premise, and the people who contributed to this anthology were all over the place with it, and that's a good thing. There were wonderful stories in this. And they ranged. There were some sci-fi ones. There were ones that were just weird. There was a lot of surrealism in this. And there was really great horror stories as well. Totally recommend. The second book I read, I had to get off the short story train. And I wanted to start reading full, single stories. The next one was a book called Lola on Fire by Rio Ewers. And this is just one that's been sitting in my TBR pile. It feels like forever. And it's not horror. This was a thriller. But think Kill Bill versus The Sopranos. That's, I'm not trying to be reductive by putting it down to that, but that's kind of what's going on in this. This was a great book. It went really fast. It's a kind of a thick, paperback. So it felt faster than it actually was. And the characters are great. The action, oh my God, the action, it goes so fast and so much happens in this book. It opens with action, intense, violent action, and it ends well, the ending isn't action, but the way the action parts end is great. Very satisfying. A very satisfying, quick moving read. Kill Bill versus The Sopranos. That's all I'm going to say. And then the third book I read is a book titled, We All Live in a Fascist Police State Now, thanks to this one fucking guy, by Stephen Kozeniewski. A-plus title. A-plus title. I was going to get this anyway. I read everything by Stephen Kozeniewski, but how can you walk past that title? And this book, I just finished it this morning, was so damn good. Now think of the title. I'll repeat it. We all live in a fascist police state now, thanks to this one fucking guy. And I've talked in past videos in 2025, saying I'm getting a little overwhelmed by the news. So I was a little worried that maybe some parts of this book would hit too close to home. And there were parts of it that were, you kind of went, ooh, but I wasn't triggered or anything. I didn't feel like I had to close the book and walk away. This is actually handled with a light touch, the subject matter. And I don't need to give you an elevator pitch on this book. The title is the elevator pitch. It's, so the story has two parts. The parts where you're following various characters in the story, and then there are parts where you're reading a blog post between a member of, there's essentially secret police, they're patriotism police, and a member of the press. And it's all done anonymously because what they're doing would be considered treason. And it's revealing things about the secret police that the public had previously known nothing about. And it's revealing things about this individual that is shining light on the organization that could possibly make it harder for them to do their jobs. That they are fascist enforcers. And I know this sounds heavy, and it can be heavy, but there's something about Stephen Kozeniewski's writing style. There is something, I don't want to say flippant about his tone, but it's a light touch. It's not ham-fisted. It's not beating you in the face with any sort of message necessarily. You picked up this book because you already agree certain things are bad. And you're reading the book and staying with it because you're already on board with what's going on. He doesn't need to make it heavy. And it actually was, it turned out to be, despite everything going on in real life, it was a nice escape. It was a fantastic book. I completely recommend it. It's not going to be a continuation of heavy things going on in real life. Okay. Now I want to talk about shows. In March, I finished probably my third full series rewatch of Supernatural. This isn't something I'm going to make a yearly thing. 15 seasons is a lot for any show. And I have to tell you, any show that goes that long is going to have whole episodes and almost entire seasons that just don't work. And Supernatural is no exception. I will say, though, that the first 5 seasons are pretty much no notes. Like, I have no complaints. It's very formulaic in the beginning. It's very Monster of the Week in the beginning. But that's kind of why it was charming. It's when we really get into the Men of Letters thing. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. When we really start getting into the Men of Letters stuff, when a certain family member who the Winchester boys have previously worshipped because they didn't get to know this family member because they died when the boys were very young, when this family member is resurrected and put back into their lives and turns out to be just a disappointing, selfish piece of shit, I really have trouble with the show after that. And I think the ending is good. I think the way they end the show is good because I remember when they were saying this will be the last season, and people would say, how do you think it's going to end? And I kept saying, I hope it ends this way. If I were a writer on this show, I would really push for it to end this way. And it is, large picture, broad strokes, how it ends. If you've watched the show, you know what I'm talking about. I'm trying not to spoil it, try not to be an asshole. If you've never seen Supernatural, it is a good show. Again, for the first 5 seasons, there are amazing episodes in later seasons. Some of my favorites. It's just, some of it starts getting a little heavy, especially coming from Dean. The show starts off being about both boys, about Sam and Dean. And in the beginning, actually, maybe it's a little more about Sam. But as it goes on, the self-sacrifice and the drive to keep going, that falls more on Dean. And if you watch it from start to finish, just binge it, you'll see the show starts to become more about Dean, more about the older brother. Slightly, just a little bit. But I did notice that this time around, this is more about, on the whole, it's more about Dean than it is about Sam. And it is about them together, but it is just more about Dean. Which I don't hate. I'm not mad about it. I just felt like I was brilliant for noticing that. I may be wrong, but anyway, the second show, we're not going to talk long about this one because I hated this show. I hated it. It's, I think it's 4 seasons. And the thing is my husband had watched this show previously and he liked it. And he said, I don't know why you won't watch this with me. It's Guillermo del Toro. You love Guillermo del Toro, Summer. Why aren't you watching this with me? You love vampires. Why aren't you watching this with me? This show has everything in it that you would like. My husband and I will have been married for 20 years. In a couple months, we will be celebrating our 20-year marriage anniversary. We have been together for 24 years. That man was so wrong. And it got to the point where me raging about all the things that were wrong with this show ruined it for him because I was pointing out hideous flaws. Now here's the thing. I do love Guillermo del Toro very much. I do love vampires very much. I do not like apocalyptic shows. I do not like things that center around an enclave of people trying to survive an outbreak of something. It's very zombie apocalypse thing. I've never liked those. And this show, called The Strain, fit that, except we're dealing with vampires and not zombies. I did not finish this. I could not finish this. I hated it so much. But I do want to say something. The creatures in this, I don't know how involved Guillermo del Toro was with the actual, I know it's based on, I guess a series of graphic novels by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. And I don't know who was the more dominant writer, but I will say you can see the Del Toro influence in the creatures. And it actually got to the point where I was like, that looks just like the mutant vampire in Blade 2. Did they steal this from that movie? Because I think Blade 2 was made first. So I looked it up and Guillermo del Toro made Blade 2. I didn't know that previously. And it's basically the same where they have the mandibles that open up and the sucker part actually shoots out. The creatures are cool. The whole mythology behind them that's explored, a lot of it is ignored, is actually really cool. But the storytelling, my God. So a lot of my problems with it are subjective. They're always going to be. But let me tell you something. Some of my problems with this were objective. There were technical storytelling problems with this that were, oh my God, I could write a book, a thick pamphlet, a novelette on everything wrong with this show because now, a lot of people like this show. If you look it up on IMDb and read the reviews, a lot of people really like this show. There is one character in particular who I kind of understand this character, but everybody hates them. Granted, I didn't make it to the end, but we've gone on long enough. I hated the show. But in case you didn't know, there is a show out there about a vampire apocalypse where Guillermo del Toro was heavily a part of it. If you want to check it out, check it out. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm not, but tell me I'm wrong. Now, the third show I watched was not horror, but I loved it. We watched all 3 seasons of Reacher, based on the Jack Reacher books. Each season is based on one book. And I watched it with my husband and my 2 teenage sons. And I loved it. I know nothing about Jack Reacher. The only thing I knew about Jack Reacher before going into this was that Tom Cruise had made a movie many years ago about where he played Jack Reacher, and everybody was horrified because Jack Reacher apparently is built like a brick shithouse. And they got another actor to play him this time who is built like a brick shithouse. This show is fun. This show is action-packed. It's silly. My youngest son, my 14-year-old, calls it Sherlock Hulk. And my husband, who had watched the previous 2 seasons, sold it to me by saying, Big Man Smash. That's what the show is. It's not what the show is, but that's a big part of it, actually. It's not trying to be anything heavy. It's not trying to be profound in any sort of way. It's an action show that gets silly. And they objectify the shit out of Alan Richardson? Is it Alan or Adam? It's Alan. Alan Richardson, who plays Jack Reacher. That dude has his shirt off so much. But there's so much about the storytelling. There's so much about the structure of the seasons. I could go on forever because there's a lot, actually, of inclusivity. And they don't make a thing about it. It's just there, which, in my very humble opinion, is how you should do it. Don't make a thing about it. Don't point it out. Just make it normal. And they do it. They do it perfectly. And the show is so good. And it's... oh my God. And the great thing is Jack Reacher, he is very smart. He is very driven, but he is not like a Swiss Army knife. He can't do everything. He needs to help. He needs help. All of these seasons, all of these mysteries or problems that have to be solved in the course of the season, it has to be a collaborative effort with other people helping him. And actually in the first season, one of the big bad guys, I'm sorry, this is a mild spoiler, he's not the person who takes him down. Someone else does. He's just kind of like backup. Not back. Yeah, I mean, he's there. And if you haven't watched this show, absolutely. I think it's on Amazon. Watch this show. It's so much fun. So what I'm watching now is Yellow Jackets. Yellow Jackets just finished releasing their 3rd season. The first season of this show is impeccable. Impeccable. It also doesn't hurt that these women are about my age. I was a teenager in the 90s, late 90s. I graduated high school in 2001. I'm a woman in my 40s now. I related to this. The soundtrack on that first season especially. Oh my God. All the nostalgia. The second season kind of lost itself, kind of lost its way. It started getting in the weeds and forgot the main story it was trying to tell. So I'm hopeful that the 3rd season will kind of pick back up and tie it all together, because I think they're going to stop at 4 seasons. I believe that's what they've said. So there's one more season after this, and if you've watched it, the very first episode opens with a scene that we don't touch on again so far. Now, I've seen the first season, I've seen the second season, haven't watched the 3rd season yet. We're still kind of recapping the first season. It's never touched on again. Who was that person who fell in the hole? Who was wearing a very familiar necklace that you become familiar with in the first season. And I hope it really picks up, because I didn't care for the second season, but the first season was so good. I'm giving the 3rd season an enthusiastic chance. I will keep you updated. I'm not 100% sure if I'll get through the whole thing by the end of this month. I will get there eventually though. So that's it. That was the month of March for me. Obviously a better month. I haven't run into a true stinker of a book yet this year. We're in April now, and nothing has completely disappointed me. Nothing. And so it's been a good year. How are you guys doing? Is the world treating you well? Is horror treating you well? Are you reading some good stuff? Are you watching some good stuff? Share with me. Tell me. Come on, recommend some stuff to me. And that'll be it for me. I will be back in May, and we'll talk about some more cool stuff.